Recently, I've become pretty obsessed with fictional worlds that feel real. Likely me going against Anno's point in Neon Genesis Evangelion and seeking escapism, it's nonetheless proved to be an interesting aspect of looking both forward at new anime and back to the classics, always with a side eye to the favorites as well. This isn't a fully new desire. Most of the reason I admire the world building of these fantastic stories is because they tend to place fingers right in thematic pies. From evidence of a failed society to the necessary variety of a whimsical one, no story can exist without a world to be set in. Just like a real-life production, everything is built on the shoulders of these small parts of things behind the scenes we won't notice, the ones playing out in the background just as full and vivid as the leads, but hazy, blurry, and seen across distance and time, having a story, but not having it written down. They're relevant only at the times our eyes glance over at them before they're thrust back into the shadows. Today is the day of the background character as we pull their books off the shelf, dust off the cover, and see just how much they've added to our favorite tales. It is an ode to the Nobodies. I don't think there's any better place to start than Cowboy Bebop. The Bebop world feels very real because it's like a spiritually true progression of ours. It's not a utopia or a dystopia, it simply is. Some things have gotten better. Humanity is able to travel across the stars and colonize new planets. In other ways, it's gotten worse. That very method of travel ended up destroying the Earth they came from. And some things have just stayed the same, like people. The ones who maintain that balance. An anime all about loneliness, absolutely reveling in the depressing aesthetic of an empty bar, we have one of our first characters to appreciate, these souls bound to these empty spaces, the bartenders. Unnamed and silent, performing their duty in setting such strong moods, with the sounds of a shaken cocktail or the pouring of booze their contribution to a wider world. One face to witness the woes of so many, always listening, always there, even when the heroes move on. Without them, there is no bar, no smoke, no long out-drawn notes of jazz. There is no Cowboy Bebop. But they can't be everything. Sometimes these spaces need more, and the paradox of lonely spaces like that is sometimes no chance for connection brings us closer than all the chance. On distant moons, isolated and alone, there stand these few outposts of human woe, the spaces they go because there's nowhere else. Separated by smoke and drowned out by jazz, they have an excuse to revel in exhaustion, to enjoy for one moment the very act of being a background character, a shadow in someone else's story before theirs must begin again in full the next day. At a table in the back, only half seen or slumped over a bar right next to the leads, they remind us of the human will in such a world. Enough energy to not be home, but not enough to truly be out. Wanting connection, but unable to grasp it. So much different than our world, yet so much the same. But that's not always the case. Occasionally a spark hits the kindling and those dormant desires rush up once more, a reminder against such grim times there is nothing which truly kills the human spirit, no matter how cloaked in smoke, drowned in liquor, or saddled by debt. We're one step away from battles and brawls, a violent reminder the fight is never done, such raucous energy is never the result of one man. Here we can only look to the unnamed, the few who are known by touch, by their fists, but never by their names. The ones who set an upbeat pace, only to see it fall apart once more, ending right where it began, always and forever. The same way it does for our main cast as they jet set across these planets on wild adventures, but always end feeling so alone on the Bebop. This world feels real enough to live in, from joke characters that show a city in desperate need of human warmth, to store owners who are just a bit too into their favorite hobby, to children causing small trouble in a big city. The minor parts that validate the lead ones. We know these places because we've met these people, seen them in the backgrounds of our own stories, maybe been them from time to time. Sometimes brimming with life and sometimes nearly dead, a world as vast as the solar system needs these signs of life for such a feel, and the Nobodies of Cowboy Bebop deliver. Vinland Saga is another series laden with dichotomy. It opens on the serene landscapes of Iceland, rolling banks of snow separating the modest homes of a simple civilization. Their lives are no doubt harsh in this extreme climate, shoveling snow off their roofs habitually, having to walk away from the village to gather water, yet we still see the delighted smiles of these young boys with a story around the fire, their parents enjoying a simple moment of calm. It seems like peace itself, even in such a harsh world. But no one here is safe. War will find them once again, as it does. The anime's first season ends in a completely opposite place from where it began, replacing the gentle snowbanks and peaceful stories with mounds of viscera and shouting matches about conquest and rulers. Our main characters kill with reckless abandon to seek out their goals, or are forced to as a last resort. There's no one who escapes it. It is one of the harshest worlds ever created in anime, and most of that is down to the nobodies. The ones whose lives are lost. The men who take spears through their mouths, the villagers whose heads are chopped off in cold, synchronous fashion, the bodies lying in an ever-growing heap of red snow. Killed by sneak attacks or direct assaults or brutal charges, there is one way life ends in this world, with violence. The importance of a few men is dependent on the deaths of so many more. The Vinland Saga story cannot exist without copious death. The story is about Canute, Askeladd, Thorfinn, the men who kill rather than are killed, but they cannot stand alone. A series deeply concerned with the rise and fall of leaders and the cost of ambitions, these nobodies make a point. They have their no removed and exist as one thing. Bodies. Bodies lining the path of kings. Canute's journey back home to challenge his father feels real because of this cost. He has a reason to gain the resolve he does to continue marching against all odds because he sees the harshness of this world and says no, so he can stop the flood of bodies which pushed him forward to begin with. But there is life which concerns our topic today as well. There's not only death. Knowing nothing of this harsh world, there are the young men of Iceland's village who are delighted to be pulled into war, seeing a death in combat as the entrance to Valhalla, to a second and better life. There are the women of Askeladd's home who welcome back these murderers with open arms and romantic intent. There are the slaves held all over the world, eyes glazed and bodies slowly wasting away. Villages who have no idea the horror about to walk right through their door with nothing of their own action being able to prevent it or let them know it would happen, just having their peaceful and happy lives all stolen away in an instant. These nobodies all exist in the same space, answering the same why. Why fight through it all if it only ends the same way? Some turn to God, others to their own resolve, and more still to embracing the very fight itself as purpose. We see not just through the main characters, but from the whole world a continual fight reasoned in so many ways, with none of them offering a solution. This is what validates our main characters. Death alone does not make the harshest world. Terrible lives do. Witnessing the struggle and failure against it all does. Led by a man who fights against the only society he's ever known, Vinland Saga needs a strong world for him to fight against, and the nobodies prove that world. Vinland Saga maintains hope, however, whether it's a new ruler or the reminders of this world's beauty. It is not a series rooted in pessimism, but some stories present this harshness and leave us to wonder about hope, with probably none better than Black Lagoon. Set in the fictional city of Rowanapur on the coast of Thailand, we see the band of pirates known as the Lagoon Crew and the illegal jobs they take: thieving, trafficking, murdering, and even more. From morally gray to getting there to pitch black, we see a spectrum of ethics from their work. But what do ethics mean between four people alone? We need to know why they act as they do, what in this world has molded them, and for that we have the nobodies. I've spoken to this before, but the opening 1 minute of the series is exceptionally strong. These shots of Rock's past as a simple businessman in Japan. He somewhat stands out from the crowd, but only because of a central position and a bit more color. He's a character meant to be initially relatable, and he is because he's one of the nobodies. His story is one of moving from a background character to a main character. He's one of the people who drags through life, eating breakfast mechanically before heading to a job they hate, to repeat it all every day. They're devoid of any real color, any real expression, any real anything. They just are, and that is the world he comes from. Without them, he would never have the perspective necessary for anime's greatest character work, even if it is an entirely simple perspective. Simple done right is better than complex done wrong. And of course, what allows his perspective to shine more is then those other nobodies he witnesses in a new world, to see if he should even have bothered moving away from the background character life to begin with. What he finds in the South China Sea is not a world which is truly different, but one where the reality of it is more recognized. Sex workers line the streets, murders happen in every alley as gunshots make up midnight white noise, and a few souls stand guarded at all times, reminiscent of the bosses Rock believed he had left behind. He makes deliveries which play out before games of Russian roulette, with his lack of expression being the most kind one of all. Everyone else cheers and laughs. They don't have defined names or faces, they instead act as the essence of this world itself. Life is so awful, so why try? They embrace it, they become cruelty itself. The series relies on Rock contrasting against this feeling from Revi and the others, and while she and the main antagonist perform the role well, key to the anime is all of society playing by these rules, defining that this is not man against man, it is man against society in its whole. It is those who have given up on so many humane traits, the living dead. These caricatures are so there is no consideration of right or wrong, but simply why. They can be so crazy because that's the world they make, the nobodies in a never-ending game of kill or be killed. They also become the basis for our main characters to make their points legitimate, especially Revi. A gun woman with bloodlust, she kills first and doesn't even ask questions later. To many, she may just seem like some demented gangster, but we know this isn't true because those are exactly the people she destroys. Many of Black Lagoon's nobodies are generic mercenaries or wannabe gangsters, the kind of people who see a harsh world and seek to use it to their advantage, and as such are why it stays as it does. Revi kills these people with such reckless abandon because they are not ones who have lived her life, they are the ones who made the world her life took place in. She turns her worst situation into assumed superiority, and it's sold on the backs of blatantly obvious evil. They are flat, meaningless characters because that's the point. These twin flames of the Lagoon crew are the last hopes of life in a city of the dead. And it would be absolutely criminal to mention the awful world of Black Lagoon, a series about picking up the gun and its cost, without also mentioning another anime centered on that same point, the more recent Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Its world is somewhere close to Ranapur, but with the mundanity of Rock's life in Japan. As David trudges to school and back, he walks past open robberies without even a casual glance, hordes of people asleep to line the streets, stains of blood where a cyberpsychosis massacre happened just the night before, piles of trash, masturbation, vomit, all of it to no reaction. Both from his dead-eyed walk and the citizens who surround him. The key here is acceptance. This is a society with no chance. If you're born into a lower tier of it, that's where you're stuck. One day you die, probably sooner than later, with the constant danger, and that's it. It's an act of running out the clock as these citizens sit idle, making David's eventual transition to a life of edge of society crime hit as hard as it does. It's the cost of feeling truly alive in their world, the world of nobodies. And he validates them right back later. They may be sitting idle, they may be doing nothing, they may have lost all shame and so many things we consider to be human, but they are still alive. The nobodies were right. However, that's not the whole of Night City. As David makes his way to Arasaka Academy, a school beyond his meager means, the people change once he rides the train, one skipping well above the poorer areas. Suddenly we see nice clothes as they sit on patches of green or look up at ornate projections. In a way never called out, the surroundings and so the people within them change here. We know nothing about them, but we know all that is needed. We know what they're not. They're not vomiting or masturbating or dying in the streets. They're less vivid than the first set of background characters, but because they're comfortable. It's bland and plain, providing credence for his mother's desire that David enter that world, away from the danger, from the trash, and from the constant pressure. We know that there's two worlds here through both of these sets of nobodies. We know that David has a choice to make, and this is what allows the series to be so impactful as he's destroyed by that decision, that he would have been either way. It was a largely forced choice, but he went against that force. So he suffers as he lived, and it depends on this world having an absolute ton of feel. Not to mention that much like Vinland Saga, Edgerunners is full of those who live only so we can see them die. The danger he faces, the destruction later in his life that he is able to cause, becoming the very thing that ruined his life. A lot of death is needed for that lesson. Everyone in Night City only gets so much life. If you want more, you have to take it from someone else. Top down, down up, through and through, David is just trying not to be one of the nobodies in a world without much choice. But these were all societies where things have been clearly wrong, where the question was apparent from the start. What about the hidden horrors which lurk behind strong fronts? Ergo Proxy, while quite divisive, is one of the most engaging dystopian anime out there, beginning and ending in Rondo, a domed city sitting atop a ruined Earth. The background characters first present us with what our brooding lead Riel Mayer might call living zombification. They're born with a purpose, literally created in artificial wombs, and destined to live out life chosen for them, usually with an autorave, an android companion who handles all of the tough tasks of their life. They drift along, never noticing the cracks in their failing society, because they've never had a reason to look anywhere but to the companion approving their simple work. So when the dome finally does begin to fall, their reaction is minimal, with the autoraves fighting back, infected with consciousness itself from the Kagito virus. Once office workers now wield weapons and risk their lives, a stark contrast from where they were only months before. Everything is completely different when Riel returns, except their demeanor. It's exactly as it always was. Their reason to go to work is the same, even if it's completely different, to get promotions and reach the higher tiers of society. A society which doesn't even exist anymore, which is literally burning before them. They know nothing but working as they were told, so even faced with the end, they continue. The thought of Rondo falling can't even cross their minds. It's all they've ever known. Some of them sit at their desks and continue to type on computers which aren't there, even physically incapable of recognizing the truth around them. Without a need to ever think, they now never can. Establishing this through the Nobodies doesn't just lay this groundwork, but lifts Riel up and adds validity to her disdain for the world around her and her generally less friendly attitude. She's surrounded by lifeless lives and has no option rather than to keep pushing forward. For the Nobodies, it's the literal end of the world and they do nothing. She sees it and fights anyway. She considers what others can't even comprehend. To comment on society and validate its characters at once, Ergo Proxy utilized the Nobodies well. Of course, we also have Psychopass, a cousin to Ergo Proxy and having a similar setup. Another city of the future where citizens' lives are determined for them, at least narrowed down to only a few choices, by Sybil, a system capable of reading human intent. Also able to prevent crimes before they occur, their society exists in peace unknown to the rest of the now failing world. Everyone goes about their lives without stress or question. They sit happily in shopping malls and flirt a little bit, or have lunch served to them by robots on the daily, or meet up in holographic cosplay in crowded clubs, completely unaware of who's right next to them and not caring at all. Meanwhile, in facilities they never see, their peers smash heads against walls, scribble meaningless nonsense all over them, or lay in a drug-filled stupor, always confined to a small, padded cell. This is not a world without class, simply one where class has been clearly defined, made an inherent characteristic. The happiness of the masses requires the absolute sadness of some. Yes, we see this with the main characters like Kagari and Masaoka, characters whose entire beings, all we know of them is this system of class. But they alone do not validate it. They are simply stories we witness of it. By having these other nobodies, we see they are really not special cases. They're just people of this world. And so having these random characters is necessary to establish this feeling, to create the platform for a perfectly exaggerated social commentary. And yet, all we get are glimpses of these characters, never more than a few seconds or a couple lines. And there's a good reason for that. The main question of Psychopass, proposed by its antagonist Shogo Makishima, is free will required to be human? Our main characters, both heroes and villains, are proof of this in one way or another. They receive focus because they are full and realized. The background characters are very literally that for a reason. Outside of the story, in more of a meta way, they are not fleshed out. They are not living full and vivid lives. That's the point. Their society designs people to be the true nobodies of a story, to have no agency, no interesting backstory, no standout qualities of design, possibly at the extreme, no reason to truly exist. That is, until agency is required of them once more. Part of Makishima's plan is a helmet which allows individuals to bypass the civil system and as such freely commit crimes. Since crime never occurred, actual methods of response are exceptionally limited and, well, unresponsive. There's no need for crimes to be reported because they're always prevented, so when one occurs, it plays out unquestioned by the people around it. They watch a man beat a woman to death and think nothing of it. They all just assume it's fake since criminal acts are impossible. It's here we see their agency at an all-time low, a sea of eyes all doing nothing. But as these helmets are distributed and chaos ensues, the helmeted begin to attack the non-helmeted, the non-helmeteds attack back. Rumors of someone wearing a helmet earlier gets them attacked, kill before your kill sets in, and this is where we see most of any of the regular citizens. They have more lines than ever, making mini speeches about the class system of latent and regular. They profess confidence in random internet theories they consider before running someone down in their car, driving it themselves when everyone else we see has it on autopilot. They finally have agency. We see more of them because there's finally something to see now, and it's ugly, it's gruesome, it's shocking. The point is that agency, being forced to decide and fight, is important. It is what allows us to be full and vivid, but that in doing so, we actually lose absolute civility. For some characters to finally be in the spotlight, others must not. While the Nobodies of Psychopaths are in very literal terms tools to develop the plot, I think that's worthy of praise when it's done well. From the New World forms an unholy mixture of series like Vinland Saga with its brutality and series like Ergo Proxy with a failing utopia. The humans we see are mostly all named, save the ones who serve as filler to make the class size look real. None are dressed better than others, or live somewhere fancy, or take different classes. They simply are. It's a simple, peaceful society reminiscent of a pre-global world without stratification and where openness and love are actively encouraged. It isn't perfect according to the standards of modernity, but it is idyllic. Sure, there isn't fame or fortune to seek, but when those things don't exist, who would even care? But within this, we see some odd signs, namely the mole rats. And this is one where I have to talk about design the most. The second I saw these creatures, I imagined the pain the series shortly calls out. Their heads are almost larger than their bodies, which themselves are contorted and frail, out of proportion as thin bones hold up oddly thick muscles. When they speak, it's almost haunting and echoey, uncanny in how human but monstrous it sounds. And when they do speak, it's primarily for one reason, to call the humans God in between the labor they're made to perform. As the anime progresses, we see mole rats outside of their society's walls which assault our protagonists. It doesn't end well. The humans of this world have what's known as power, psychic abilities ranging from basic levitation of objects to exploding their enemies' heads in a pile of viscera to sucking them up in a black hole and killing them with spaghettification. The brutality against From the New World's background characters stands out because of these reasons combined. It is not two beings on equal footing killing each other as it is in something like Vinland Saga. It is one which is superior slaughtering the other, often enjoying it and seeing it as the natural order. But what makes this special is that it is still a commentary on the human race alone. The anime's final twist explains why their society appears so ideal. Everything which wasn't ideal was killed. As power developed in humans, some were blessed and others were not. In fact, a relatively small percentage were blessed. This led to extreme conflicts, and the solution to make the world peaceful once more, to reconcile with this new evolution of the human race, came from the haves against the have-nots. They were turned into the mole rats. These painful, haunting forms are important to see because we learn that we are not witnessing the cruelty of nature, but rather of the very human drive forward. The drive to create somebodies by turning the rest into nobodies. For some reason, I decided I wanted to do this outside in -2-degree weather. You know what? Let's have a little fun. Let's show some of the nice, cool, very, very cold. Yeah, all the cold. I'll probably edit that out. It's just my fucking house. But yeah, so I decided I want to do this outside in
-2-degree weather for some reason, because this is the spot I like to be when my mind is destroyed. But yeah, this was obviously a bit different than usual, very general, just kind of talking in this weird mix of both review and also thematic elements. That's a lot of wind. So yeah, obviously let me know what you thought. This is some stuff that just with limited time and limited mental energy left from life really sucking, I'm gonna do a bit more. Kind of a precursor to some experimentally exceptionally short film thingies I might do, because I have a lot that needs to be expressed. But that's stuff you'll see coming up in the new year, not this video, which is a completely different thing. So yeah, let me know what you thought of it. I was gonna do some happier background characters as well, but I just don't really have the time to add that in, and it's already a 25-minute video. So but yeah, important links in the pinned comment. Twitter, who fucking cares anymore? Just Discord, which is a cool hangout spot, and Patreon, which is really, really important. I hate to feel like I'm begging, but right now it's more important than ever. These lovely people above me support me there and help me keep doing this and push through all the shit, so thank you very much to them, but to everyone for watching as always, and hopefully I'll see you again soon.